It's Red Eye Radio. Gary McNamara and Eric Harley talk about everything from politics to social issues and news of the day. Whether you're up late or you're just starting your day, welcome to the show. From the Uniden America Studios, this is Red Eye Radio.
Hello and welcome. He is Gary McNamara. I'm Eric Harley. As the Thursday show begins, Gary, how are you?
Doing all right.
Yeah. All right.
I was just trying to find out, because you and I have talked about the congestion tax in New York City for the longest time. It's been a thing of conversation on our show, and it looks like it's gone. And I was just until about 10 minutes ago. I was trying to do research. What does the federal government have to do with it? What does the federal government have to do with the congestion tax, in New York City? Why is that? And so I finally found the answer. Because you and I are against the congestion tax in New York City. We've always viewed it as a way just to be a fun, and they're almost admitting it was a fundraiser.
Yeah, right.
Because as we said before, what is it, $9? Still, my favorite one is we're saving you money because it was going to be 15 and we put it down to 9.
Exactly.
That was my friends in New York City just went bonkers on that one.
Right.
It's like,
yeah.
we were going to tax you $15. Now we're just going to tax you $9. You've saved $6.
Well, I'm surprised they didn't do this. When it was Bloomberg saying $8 a day, that was years ago. Remember, he was saying $8 a day, everything below 86th. $8 a day, and then it was going to be $16 a day for trucks. I'm surprised they didn't use this. Look, if you adjust that $8 for inflation, we're only going to $9. It should be much higher. It's ridiculous. Ridiculous.
Said Transportation Secretary Duffy is rescinding the November agreement. So there was the federal highway agreement on it to allow the congestion tax under the value pricing pilot program for failing to meet its eligibility standards. It allows for certain federally funded highway programs to be tolled, but Duffy explains that the Big Apple's congestion pricing does not conform to the narrow exception. New York's program does not give drivers a toll-free option, and it functions to raise revenues for the Metropolitan Transit Authority rather than reduce congestion of its own right. So what they're saying is federal funds that went to build those highways, whatever streets the federal funds, went to is the reason the federal government has a say in it. Because that was my question. Well, if it's a state thing, what does the federal government have to do with it or city?
Right.
Well, it was a state thing because she was behind it. The state is doing it. So I was just wondering where the authority came from.
Right. Yeah. And there it is.
And so there it is. But I was searching for that. I was like going crazy, going, what gives them the authority? And thanks to James Lynch, National Review, they had it.
All right.
Where the actual authority comes from. Because that's one of the things, you and I talk about it all the time. A story comes out there and it's like, well, what about this? What about this? What gives, it's you and I are always looking at stories that come out there and it's like, they don't connect the dots completely.
Right.
It's like, well, the federal government said it. What does the federal government have to do with it? Explain it. Somebody explain it. Somebody explain it. And just before we went on the air, somebody explained it to me. Right. I finally found it. So that's all. Good. That's all good. Interesting day yesterday, as it always is it not?
It hasn't stopped. It really hasn't stopped since Election Day. And especially hasn't stopped. In fact, it's only sped up since January 20th. There's been, one nonstop day. I don't know that it doesn't feel like we've turned the calendar at all since January 20th. It's just one really long day, which we think is great. But it's, the question is, I guess, as now you're a month into it, what are they going to do again? How do you appease those who are, again, we know it's unrealistic to think that prices are going to come down. quickly, but how do you appease that crowd? How do you show them something? How do you demonstrate something? And I guess we'll see what the GOP comes up with. Tax cuts, President Trump hitting on tax cuts during the day yesterday, but we'll see if they can get that done. The screaming about cuts, because what you're hearing is, the president, the administration is connecting it to the DOGE thing. Look what we can do. We can afford to do this because look at what we're finding with DOGE. My question would be, does that doom you with any of the your Democrats aren't going to be on board, but is there anybody who thinks politically in the GOP that's a problem? Saying, okay, look, we can't necessarily connect this to DOGE. I guess you just ignore it and say, they can claim whatever they want. We're going to do this in this bill and see where it goes. I don't know.
I'm not sure where you're going.
Well, the point is if you connect it to DOGE has got all the negative publicity from the press.
Okay, all right.
You if you're a senator in the GOP, do you have an issue with that?
Well, Collins does. Well, I just saw the headline yesterday. Collins has a problem with DOGE, and I was just like, okay.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that was actually my point. And Collins seems to have an issue with anything the GOP does.
I think right now the cuts are fine. The challenges, and I got an email from one of our great listeners who said, I see, Trump's polling is down. It's down in a few, but it's steady in a couple of others. I mean, it's whether the CBS poll, I forgot the other one that was out there that showed him, up, was it, did I keep it here? The couple other polls show that he's doing fine. He's doing fine, and he's above water in those polls. The other polls showed that he's a little bit below, but all are very close to being in the margin of error. Mm-hmm. And I think one of the questions I would have is, well, as we know, and I forgot, was it the Rasmussen poll? What was the poll that showed that the number of, even though he's underwater in independents, that actually the amount, it's like a 7-point swing in where Republicans, were over Democrats, that there's just more Republicans out there. Mm-hmm. So what you see is independents and Democrats have become Republicans, which keeps them above water in some of the other polls. Mm-hmm. Number one, taking a serious look at the polls this early on, I don't think means anything. Mm-hmm. But if you're going to look at the polls, I think the one that blew me away was the Quinnipiac poll, where the approval of Democrats in Congress, because this is where you look at it and you say, okay, where is the public when it comes to the different political parties in Congress, not just the generic, do you approve of what Congress is doing, separating it by party, because that gives you more of an indication of where people stand on the issues, I believe.
Right, yeah.
All right, Democrats in Congress, approval rating, 22%, net minus 46, disapproval 68%, but the net is minus 46. Republicans in Congress, approval 40%, disapproval 52%, net minus 12. Mm-hmm. That now Congress is always underwater.
Yeah,
because you can just view it as generically. But Democrats are being destroyed right now. Mm-hmm. I mean, they're just being destroyed. So when you look overall at the challenges that this president has, you and I were talking about this in the pre-show meeting, I think the public's a little different than it's been for a long time. Mm-hmm. When we were talking hypotheticals, as the Democrats were on many economic issues, the public would favor it. But the public has now felt inflation. Mm-hmm. They dealt with obvious lies and obvious untruths and misinformation from Democrats that was extremely obvious. Trump has to watch out for that. For example, because the Democrats are going to pound on it. And if the White House is worried about what Trump says, when it's not on their, when they don't address it on their Rapid Response 47, because they address everything. There's two things that I look at over the last couple of weeks and went, nope. You know, you can make the case that you want to solve. You and I were talking about Ukraine and Russia. You can make the case of corruption in Ukraine
all day.
You can make the case that the corruption is too bad and we need to end this war and there needs to be compromises on both sides. You can't say Ukraine started the war.
Right.
That is a thing where the people look at it and go, stop it. That's not true. The other thing is, when he put out on Truth Social that if you are not for tariffs, basically as the way to fund the country through the tax base, you're being controlled by China. Those are the kind of things he doesn't need to do. And I don't think just one of them hurts because most Republicans are anti-tariff. Almost all conservatives are.
Right.
Which is still a significant portion of the people that vote for Republicans. Most conservatives, are. I look at every conservative friend I know, they're like, well, if it's used for negotiating tactic, that's fine. And it's like, yeah, but what if you put them in? Well, for China, yes. But as we've seen the polling, the one thing where Trump is way underwater is tariffs. Why? Because it's different than it was. Nothing is a hypothetical in economics anymore. People know if you change in the supply chain or just in the general umbrella of economics, if you increase the cost, it's going to be passed on to the consumer.
Yeah.
They know
right.
that.
Yeah.
They know. That's why there isn't a cry to raise the minimum wage as much as there was. People understand it. Those are the challenges that Trump faces. And yesterday was a great example where he's out there saying we need massive tax cuts. 20% of the savings from DOGE, $5,000. That's what Elon Musk, responding to somebody who was talking about 20%, which would be $5,000. And he said, yeah, but you can't be promising all this stuff that in all likelihood is not going to happen once it gets to Congress and not deliver on it. There is you and I talked about this. It's unreasonable for people to think that Trump day one would be able to cut taxes. But the fact is, in a couple of instances, not cut taxes, cut prices, a couple of instances, he said it. Democrats have that on tape. Democrats have the quote. Democrats will pound that. There are people, not the majority at all, but there are people that voted for Trump believing prices would start coming down in the first month. So that's the concern, that those are the challenges. I don't think the polls show that he's suffering from that yet, but those are the political concerns out there. And they're a concern when Rapid Response 47 doesn't defend the president on those statements because they are so active right now. And Rapid Response 47 is from, basically Levitt and his press department, his public relations department that puts, and they are very active. If there's anything out there, boom, they hit it if they know they've got it.
Right.
And so that's how you know.
And, in the tax cuts, I guess what I fear is setting up something that becomes this back and forth war between, hey, we wanted to match this standard. So, whatever you say, you go with the DOGE or Elon Musk number of 5,000, or you go the 20%, or you go whatever it is, you're charging basically Congress, which is really the Senate, the GOP Senate, or Senate GOP. You're basically setting them up, and if they don't meet that standard, are you going to be unhappy? Are you creating a rift unnecessarily? Because any tax cuts going forward that's going to be a step forward. That's going to be good. If you can get anything done, that's going to be good. But if you set the tone where you set this expectation that it needs to be this amount and they don't get it done, you don't have the votes from the GOP in the Senate, then all of a sudden everybody's screaming, well, we want everybody who's not fully on board with this standard, we need to primary them in the next, this is where it goes. If you set something up that is going to be impossible to meet, that you're not going to get on Capitol Hill, are you setting yourself up for failure? And that would be my concern. I'm probably reading too much into it, but we've been here before, and that's a problem. I don't want to see that kind of, don't set yourself up for failure. Say, look, we want to push for this, but we're good if we get this. If that's one thing, all right, hey, we got this. Remember on the corporate tax rate, Trump wanted to initially, 15%?
Yeah.
And they got 21, and we thought, my gosh,
and he did
that's
that,
huge.
He did that all on his own.
Right.
That was we gave complete and total credit for that.
Hopefully it goes that way.
We got a great show ahead, 866-90 Red Eye.
This report is brought to you by Shell Rotella. With advanced synthetic technology, is designed to help keep your rig running with more mileage and less maintenance. Tires command a lot of attention. As a top expense for drivers and a leading cause of CSA violations, any tire maintenance practice that can help extend tire life is worth consideration. Consider tire balancing, which can set you up for savings and a smoother ride before your tires touch the highway. Tire balancing corrects an uneven distribution of weight in tires and wheel assemblies, but the trick is to be proactive and not reactive. Conduct routine tire inspections and pay special attention to any unusual wear patterns. Once unusual tread wear is visible on a tire, its traction and stopping distance is reduced and its lifespan will likely be shortened.
Get in touch with Red Eye Radio, toll free at 866-90 Red Eye.
It's Red Eye Radio. He's Eric Harley, and I'm Gary McNamara. It was unbelievable yesterday because when I woke up, it was snowing, and I and I looked down. I'm like, wow, where's the snow coming from? Because it's not in the forecast.
Yeah,
it's like there's really when it was snowing where I was, there's a 0% chance of snow. I look at the radar map. I'm getting a thin band of lake effect snow from Lake Louisville, which is about 45 miles north of me. This real tiny thin band, probably less than 5 or 6 miles long, all the way down 45 miles south right over me. It wasn't even my own lake that I live on because, you probably could have got it from my lake if you were in a particular section.
They said some of it did come from various lakes, but Lake Louisville is the largest in this area.
It was unbelievable. I'm like, what? I could...
There was some when I pulled up in my truck, we had the lightest flurries. And
just now?
Yeah, a little while ago. I looked up at the sky and I was like, but there's breaks in the clouds. So it has to be that leftover effect from the lake effect. And you could barely see it because I had my lights on. And in front of my lights against the window of the building, you could see it. And I'm like, wow, okay, all right, whatever. I mean, we just have the weirdest weather. We're going to be 72 next Tuesday.
I know. We were 80 last week.
Yeah.
Remember? Or middle of last week. It's like,
it's crazy.
People are like, why am I getting sick? I don't think necessarily it's the temperature, though. But I'm telling you, it's so dry out. They said that's the thing. It's so dry and cold out that when that dry water goes, or the dry air goes over that water, it just picks it up.
Yeah.
And I thought I was a lake effect snow expert growing up in Buffalo. And I have yet to see anything like that thin band going 45 miles from a much smaller lake, for example, than Lake Erie or Lake Ontario that I'm used to when it comes to lake effect snow.
Well, I'm watching my security camera, and it was still fairly late. It was 9:30 in the morning, and it's still, it's coming down. The snow's coming. It didn't accumulate because the wind was pretty high.
Right.
So it was blowing all over the place. There wasn't much really to speak of. But lake effect snow is not something we're used to.
Catch all 5 hours of the show live every night on the Red Eye Radio app, available in the App Store. Red Eye Radio.
And he is Eric Harley, and I'm Gary McNamara. Welcome and good morning. Thanks so much for being here this morning, as always. So yeah, interesting day yesterday. I will say this came out the president talking about that he supports the House, and I understand why he supports the House. He wants the whole bill right now, and you can read what he actually says, that he plans on doing massive tariffs, 25% on automobiles, and he needs the tax cuts in order. He needs the massive tax cuts in order to justify the harm that the tariffs will cause on the American consumer. That's the message that he is sending out. And as, again, we have said twice, well, that would be third time that he has admitted it or communicated to the American public. The tariffs are going to hurt the American public. And you have to come out and say, but it's worth it in the long run. But it's the first time, or in the last couple of weeks, the 3 times now that he's mentioned it, is the first time since he's ever been president that he's ever said there's a negative thing to tariffs. And that's the realization of economics now. I don't know the debate going on in the White House, but there is a debate. So when he came out yesterday and said, no, I want the House bill, I want everything done right now, well, we saw last week that, he delayed any tariffs really with Canada and probably Mexico for at least 7.5 months.
Right.
And the reason he did that is he wants the tax cuts knowing that's going to happen. Now, that's not – look, I voted for Trump to stop the weaponization of government. Everyone knew that when it came to tariffs, we would disagree not against China, not against people that are actually countries that are actually involved in unfair trade practices, but tariffs as a means to fund the government, which is not going to happen. You can't do it. It's just, we've already gone through the numbers with you. We did that a couple of weeks ago. You can't come close. You put a 25% tariff on everything that comes into the United States. You don't even pay the interest on the debt. So the fact that he's talking about as a funding mechanism, clearly the president hasn't done the math on it. We have figured that you would need to raise tariffs on everything that comes into the United States by 200% to day one fund the government, but then after that, it would decrease drastically because the funding would be based on the fact that people would be willing to pay 200% more for the goods and services coming in from another country.
Yeah, the purchases would drop of any incoming items dramatically. Therefore, the revenue would slow down greatly.
But I credit the president for finally telling the American public, telling the truth on economics. Because you can't economics that's the thing that people have learned. The one thing is you used to be able to sell. Both parties could sell hypotheticals. If we do this on economics, this will happen. Well, inflation stopped that all.
Yeah.
Inflation stopped that. We found out that government spending causes inflation. And so the challenge that the president has, and I'm not a fan of anybody in the executive branch or Congress saying, let's try to regulate the business by doing this over here or doing this over here or doing this over here. I noticed if you want to know where they're going in the White House, it's Rapid Response 47 that you go to because you can see what they're willing to defend and what they're not willing to defend. For example, on tariffs, they talk about, you've seen a couple of posts where they talk about steel companies saying this is going to really help them. Well, of course it is, because you're picking the winner of the steel company. What you're not talking about is the people that have to pay the higher cost of steel, American companies, and how it will affect them. Economics is economics. I can't change it. You can't change it. Trump can't change economics. You can change the government relationship to the budget. You can affect the economy in certain ways by doing it, but you can't change how people respond to incentive. You just can't. I mean, that's it's almost gravity. It's almost gravity talk. You cannot defy gravity, and economics is the same thing. And so when people say your opinion, and you and I have always said, it's not our opinion. It's our observation of reality of how economics works through the ages.
Well, and it's clear now that Trump has the same observation, because he wouldn't have put out there that, well, there's a good chance it's going to cause pain, and then he delays the Mexico thing, and then he also puts in what they called a plan on tariffs, which wouldn't take effect for several months. Well, all right, then if we go back to the beginning, if the argument is tariffs are helpful to the economy and it doesn't cause pain, then 100% tariffs on everything starting day one. And you don't flinch. That didn't happen. Because there is definitely going to be an effect. It's going to be a negative effect. The question is, do you think that can properly be avoided by cutting over here? But when people see prices skyrocket, they're going to say, well, you gave me a tax cut, but it doesn't mean anything. I mean, this is the danger that you're in if you do fully implement the taxes, if we're talking about a 25% across the board tariff on everything. If we get to that level, then everybody's going to be going, wait a minute. Yeah, appreciate the tax cut, but we're still dealing with high prices out here, and that's something you said you were going to take care of. The average person they're not categorizing, well, this is because of a tariff, that's because of this. They're looking at prices. They look at the numbers. They look at the price on the shelf. They look at the price of whatever they're buying. And so when they go into the store to look at appliances, or they go shop for a car, and all of a sudden they're seeing this increase in prices, they're not seeing prices come down. Even after you give them a tax cut, that's going to be a problem.
And the president tied it all together yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you didn't have to read into anything. He wants 25% tariffs on autos. He's talked about the fact of tariffs across the board as policy in order to fund the government. And then, because understanding there's going to be a negative effect on the consumer, then he wants the massive tax cuts from the House to happen right now. Because if it doesn't happen right now, there's debate inside the White House. We can't do these massive tariffs. We can't we need to do something that's going to take down the impact of inflation, which would be the tax cuts. Then you heard the $5,000 because we're going to save $2 trillion a year. Well, you're not going to save $2 trillion by the end of the year that will justify Congress giving you $5,000 back.
Right.
Because the budget's going to be out very soon.
Yeah.
The budget for the rest of the year is going to be out. And then the budget, come for, the president's budget that, would start October 1st, and then Congress passing it, you would have to cut $2 trillion by that particular point. That's not going to happen.
Well, and again, if it is believed, and you're promoting it as, and I was talking about DOGE cuts before, well, now you just put it into the realm of tariffs. If you have too many that on Capitol Hill in the GOP that believe, well, he's doing this so that he can do the tariffs, and they don't want the tariffs, do you have the votes to get the cuts done? That's my question. Because if they believe, well, wait a minute, this is going to be the quid pro quo, and we're setting you up to enact these tariffs that we disagree with, are you going to get them all on board for those tax cuts that you want? Because if that's how you're promoting it, that's what they're going to see. They're going to say, well, wait a minute, I'm all for the tax cuts, but you're saying we want to implement these tax cuts, and you're tying it to the tariffs, which I disagree with. And I don't want this tied to tariffs. And so the language of the bills, any bill, would start to change.
Yeah, I don't think, but I think he's going to use the his emergency authority. I don't think he's going to want
on the tariffs.
Congress. Yeah, I don't think he's going to want.
No. I don't think they're going to do anything on tariffs.
Right.
But
right.
what I'm saying is, are they going to slow their roll based on what they're doing on taxes, knowing he's going to implement the tariffs? Are they saying, well, wait, hold on a second, we got to be careful what we do here, because we know we're going to do this and then you're going to do that. We don't want you doing that. This is the problem that you have with this entire scenario. You don't have the entire GOP on board on the tariffs. They've been very quiet on that.
Well, that's how you know. You know how Republicans are when they're quiet. And again, you can see what the White House is willing to defend on rapid response 47.
Right.
And I went through it on a couple of things, today, and I'm like, okay, they didn't touch this, they didn't touch this, they didn't touch this. And it's criticism against the president. And if there's any criticism and they know they have the answer, they put it on rapid response 47 if you've looked at it. Well, and they'll get into the minutia of stuff.
You and I have been, wondering. We said, okay, look, the inflation numbers probably told a story for them, and they probably looked at that and said, well, there's some things we can do right now, some things we can't do right now, based on where the inflation is right now. But is there anybody in the ear of the president? It's not Peter Navarro when it comes to slowing the idea of tariffs.
Wouldn't be Lutnick either.
It's not Lutnick. Susie Wiles, I don't know.
Yeah, somebody's in his ear about it.
Or are phone calls being made from Capitol Hill from the GOP?
Or is it the GOP leadership saying
exactly
you don't have the numbers
right
you don't have the numbers in the Republican Party to support the tariffs. You're never going to get a bill from Republicans saying 25% tariffs.
Right.
So it's going to have to be, you're going
and you might have a problem on other bills if we believe this is the road you're going to go down. We don't want to own this because we're going to have to fight for this at the midterm. We're going to have to fight against this at the midterm if fully implemented.
And that's why I know that I said before the election, he said put in the tariffs. I said, fine. I'm for people involved in unfair trading practices, absolutely. Mm-hmm. Reciprocal, yeah, I can see doing it. Our problem was always the fact that he would never talk about the fact that the consumer pays.
Right.
Now he has acknowledged that over the last couple of weeks.
Right.
And that's a problem. The other thing is with Canada, for example. Mexico's a different ballgame, but with Canada, when he talks about how unfair Canada is, you wrote the free trade agreement with them. Mm-hmm. That's the other thing that people realize.
And I haven't seen anywhere where anybody's asked him yet, are you going to completely scrap USMCA for a new deal?
Right. Was it a failure that you said was the best thing ever? And and again, we deal with reality of what actually happened and what was actually said and the criticism that can be used against him. As I said, though, early on, I'm not really worried about tariffs because we're in the reality of economics. Even before the president said, admitted that they'll be paying from tariffs, but it'll be worth it, is what he has stated. Mm-hmm. But he feels, that's why they delayed it 7.5 months, is because they know it. As long as I know the recognition is there, that limits the ability to slow down the economy by putting in tariffs.
Right.
I think if they do it, they'll be, against China, which you can justify with the American public. All the polling shows it.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Tariffs, yeah. But it'll be interesting to see what happens here. But yesterday was definitely telling when he was talking about we need massive tax cuts, because we're going to be putting on 25% tariffs on automobiles coming in and everything. And I'm like, wow. Mm-hmm. That's not the way. Look, it's not the way I want government run. Number one, you cannot run an economy on tariffs. It's impossible.
Right.
Everybody's done the figures. You can't do it. But I'm not in favor of central planning where you say, let's target tariffs to help this company, but it's going to hurt this company, but help this. I don't want the central planning coming, whether it's Democrats or Republicans. I'm against central planning in government for people in government to try to figure out how we can manipulate an economy to exactly the way we want it, because it always fails.
Right. Eventually, there's too much pain, and eventually you have to back down.
Yeah.
We've seen it. We've been here before.
We're seeing it now. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. We're going to put these massive tariffs. They're delayed 7.5 months.
Right.
There's a reason.
Right. Well, there was a reason for the delay with Mexico.
Yeah.
There's a reason behind all of it. And the question is, does it fully happen? Does it ever happen?
866-90 Red Eye.
We'll be right back with more Red Eye Radio with Eric Harley and Gary McNamara.
It's Red Eye Radio. He's Eric Harley, and I'm Gary McNamara. But as I said yesterday, every other topic out there, I mean, every topic's important, but, the weaponization of government, what we saw from the Democrats has ended. That was the number one thing. But number two, what they're doing with DOGE is, as I said yesterday, is so far above anything else. It's the most important thing that we have to do. You and I have talked about the debt for the longest time, but to go through and audit everything, even if you make mistakes, even if you oversell, what the cuts may be, the fact that we're on this path and the American public still backs it is just, it's still mind-boggling to me that this is going on, which is great. It's about time.
Top of the hour news is brought to you by House Products. Visit houseproducts.com.
This is Red Eye Radio on Westwood One. Now, it's Red Eye Radio. Gary McNamara and Eric Harley talk about everything from politics to social issues and news of the day. Whether you're up late or you're just starting your day, welcome to the show. From the Uniden America Studios, this is Red Eye Radio.
Welcome and good morning. He is Eric Harley, and I'm Gary McNamara. Thanks so much for being here this morning. All right. Trump continues. Well, Trump doesn't actually. The Senate continues to interview his cabinet picks, and what was it, 2 weeks ago or something? I remember I said, just get this over with, because obviously there are people I disagree with that are on his cabinet, based on where their stands are. Right. On a variety of different issues. Picking Lori Chavez-DeRemer, I think it is. I'm completely against.
Right.
I mean, that to me was the worst pick.
Right.
The worst pick. But, seeing her hearing yesterday, basically, I have to do what Trump tells me to do. Right. So that's where it is. I'm going to do what Trump tells me to do. Right. It's interesting because here's Markwayne Mullin, Senator Mullin, talking about the misunderstanding that people have about her. Well, okay. What he says is, look, what he communicated to me was, look, we disagree with what she believes on labor, but we got union members voting for us, union support. The imagery is what matters to them. So we're not going to do anything. We're not going to do the radical stuff she wants, but the imagery is there.
Okay.
If my analysis is wrong, I'm going to play it now. Okay. Here we go. All right.
Is Lori, the Secretary of Labor nominee that President Trump has put out. There's some confusion going on. Like, why did President Trump pick Lori? She's a Republican congressman, and at the same time, she supports the PRO Act. We're a right-to-work state in Oklahoma. And obviously, you guys know I've had some problems with the union. Sean O'Brien and I kind of had a moment or two. As you guys also know, we've come to a common agreement that we're friends now. There are some differences, without question, but this is a new coalition that President Trump has put together. I mean, you think about Bobby, you think about Tulsi, now you think about Lori. President Trump has been real unique in expanding our party. The unions, is the first time we won the union votes in decades. He won 59% of the union vote, just like the Native American vote. He's the first Republican to carry it since Nixon with 63% of the vote. So while she may not be ideal for all of us, it represents a negotiation that's taken place inside our party that's saying we can set some differences aside, but for America, for the better part of our country, let's figure out what we can agree on.
There you go. Am I right?
Yeah.
Was my analysis right?
Yeah, I'd say that's what I would say that's what he's trying to say. Yeah. Again, the question would be, all right, great. I guess we'll see 4 years from now, right? Because that's when the work will be done. That's when we can look back and go, okay, this they did or this they didn't do. You don't owe anything to Sean O'Brien. You don't owe anything to union leadership. But the question would be, do you owe something to union members? And is this enough? If it's a political quid pro quo or door opening, saying, look, you guys supported us. We're going to show our ability to listen. How meaningful is that? Or is it the first step to moving even further in that direction? Only time's going to tell.
Well, I think the best thing, as we've always said, the best thing Republicans offer unions is the fact that we wish to keep the manufacturing base. We want to lower the price of electricity. We want massive amounts of production of fossil fuels. We want electricity prices to be the cheapest on the entire planet that will entice more companies to come here. If you don't have the jobs, if manufacturing fails, as the Democrats want it to fail, they want manufacturing to fail. Why? What do you mean they want manufacturing to fail? Because it puts carbon into the atmosphere. It's got to go. Look, Biden had no problem killing the pipeline.
Right.
Tens of thousands of jobs, union jobs, were lost. He didn't care. Climate change.
Go learn to code.
Yeah, go learn to code. No big, no big deal. That's the one thing they have to offer, as we've said. When you look at, because the union members figured it out, even the union leadership did. The union leadership failed the members when they agreed, when they didn't fight back and say, look, you guys producing a product that nobody wants and has to be subsidized by the government is not going to make it so this union has a future. You can't do this. It's not going to work out. You're still not making money. Our union jobs, they didn't do that. The union members recognized it. The union leadership did not. To the point of a year and a half ago, when the UAW was negotiating, remember, they were saying, well, if the companies get subsidized, then the taxpayers should subsidize the unions too, private sector unions. I mean, it was getting to the point of being absolutely bizarre. And so is he picking people and attempting to give, I think, political favors with the appointment, but not in what the union leadership really wants? Because you think about it, who was I see the other day who was, just blasting, teachers' unions. Teachers' unions are the worst. The teachers' union is horrible. They don't, as we found out with COVID, they don't care about the kids.
Right.
They're far left. They're anti-American. The teachers' union, what's her name? I can't think of her name at the moment. She's a nutcase. She's a complete radical. Yeah. And these are the unions. These are the people, the unions that control so much of the public education sector. And so when you have a Chavez-DeRemer who has been totally pro unions in government and supported the PRO Act. Let's play Rand Paul. Last I saw, Rand Paul was not going to support her. Was when they talked about the PRO Act, which would, again, kill right-to-work states. Here's Rand Paul with her, the back and forth. Here we go.
Welcome. I enjoyed our meeting in our office, and I know you're aware of this, but about half the country has right-to-work laws. 26 states have them. When you compare right-to-work states with non-right-to-work states, you see that the right-to-work states have double the employment growth. If you look at manufacturing jobs, they have 5 times the manufacturing job growth. If you look at disposable income in the right-to-work states, about $3,000 more per individual for disposable income in the right-to-work states. The PRO Act wasn't just about organizing or enabling unions to organize, which they already have the right to do. The PRO Act was about overturning right-to-work laws in 26 states, half of the country. Most of these states would argue that this would be a horrendous invasion of their prerogatives. The chairman asked you, and then the ranking member asked you, do you still support the PRO Act? The reason we want to know is this is a tremendous sort of invasion of the states' rights to decide these. This would be overturning the right to work laws in half of the country. Do you still support the PRO Act or don't you support the PRO Act?
Thank you, Senator Paul, and I appreciated our meeting as well. I thought it was quite what you shared with me is how important it is to you and your state, and I heard that from many members. The right to work is a fundamental tenet of labor laws, where states have a right to choose if they want to be a right to work state, and that should be protected.
PRO Act would have overturned that.
Yes, thank you, Senator. I signed on to the PRO Act because I was representing Oregon's 5th District, but I also signed on to the PRO Act because I wanted to be at that table and have those conversations. But I fully, fairly, and support states who want to protect their right to work. I have said that to every senator that I have visited
So you
with.
no longer support the aspect of the PRO Act that would have overturned state right to work laws?
Yeah, there were so many parts.
That's a yes?
Yes. There.
Okay. Do I believe that she supported and co-sponsored the act when she did it because she just wanted a place at the table? No.
No, I don't buy that.
No, I don't buy it either. So,
no.
But the fact is, she said she's against it. She answered minimum wage right because the liberals were hitting Bernie Sanders. She said, "That's your job, not mine. I'll enforce the law what it is. That's Congress's job, not mine."
Right.
I'm like, oh, that was a good answer.
Sure.
So what it is, and so I would agree with Markwayne Mullin, his communication. This is simply the imagery that we're a big table, but we're really not.
Yeah.
We'll only go so far. We're not going to go as far as what she wants to do.
Yeah. It's
Or we're not going to go as far as what Robert Kennedy Jr. wants to do.
right.
That's the message.
Which, were for both of us, I think both of those nominees were a great concern. If you're doing the will of the president, if you're truly doing that all along, then I'm not going to have an issue with you. Unless I disagree with the president on what his will is on any particular issue, I'm not going to have a problem with the whoever's in charge of that department. I would say with RFK Jr., the things I would look out for, number one for me, is abortion. And any major move on that, you're going to hear about it. The problem that they would have in enacting any personal agenda would have is there's going to be a fire alarm if they try and enact a personal agenda that goes against the will of the president or goes against the agenda of the president. So I suspect that's not going to happen. We'll see where it goes. We'll see what the play is with unions. If the play with unions is, look, we want to show the union members that there is a payoff here. You supported us for a reason, then great. But the reason would be what? I mean, if you get the payoff, what's behind the payoff is actual growth within whatever sector they're in. If it's the UAW, that means we want the OEMs to be profitable. And profitable may sound like, in fact, is with union leadership a dirty word, but it's the long-term sustainability of the unions that you would want to put on full display if that is where they're moving.
Well, I agree with RFK Jr.'s first move. The new HHS guidelines for definitions.
Yeah.
Sex, a person's immutable biological classification is either a male or female.
Right.
Female is a person of the sex characterized by the reproductive system with the biological function of producing eggs. Male is the person of sex characterized by the reproductive system with the biological function of producing sperm. Woman, an adult human female. Girl, a minor human female. Man, an adult human male. Boy, a minor human male. Mother, a female parent. Father, a male parent.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, we kind of went through this in the past with the CDC because Obama came in and changed a lot of the medical definitions in the CDC. And Trump came in and said, well, wait a minute. No, we're going to go back and we're going to redefine these things. So that sounds like a very Trump move, and that is a good move by RFK Jr. That's something you want done in that department. Set the tone very quickly. Here's what this means. We're gonna when we're talking health and human services, we're gonna deal with biology, science, the truth, the facts. It's silly that we even have to state those definitions, but in today's world, of course, you do.
866-90-RED-EYE.
Brought to you by FPPF, Fuel Power Max.
Most owner-operators leased to larger carriers are paid on a per-mile basis or a percentage of revenue per load. The per-mile basis is most prevalent among larger fleets. Percentage at smaller. Pay per mile tends to dominate discussions about pay just because it's easier to measure, and pay per mile often is wrongly used as the deciding factor in leasing to a carrier. While pay per mile can be a vital factor, it's not a cure for every ill, nor does it mean a big settlement check is coming an owner-operator's way. Why? Because pay per mile always must be considered in balance with gross revenue as well as total costs. Gross revenue can include flat mileage pay that varies by length of haul, percentage revenue pay, and more. Most importantly, though, for every revenue dollar generated, only part of that dollar is profit. But for every extra dollar of cost saved, the entire dollar contributes to profit. Knowing and understanding your cost to operate is fundamental to understanding the true value of any pay package. Owner-Operator Business 101 is provided by Overdrive's Partners in Business program. Go to overdriveonline.com to the Partners in Business section of the website for more details on this and many other topics. Brought to you by Shell Rotella. With advanced synthetic technology is designed to help keep your rig running with more mileage and less maintenance.
Coming up, more with Gary McNamara and Eric Harley. It's Red Eye Radio.
It's Red Eye Radio. He is Eric Harley, and I'm Gary McNamara. Welcome, and good morning. We got some great audio. Footage, you see him trying to back off from DEI. We'll get to that one. Also, Democrats moving away from, some Democrats, not all, a few Democrats moving away from the whole green energy thing. I thought it was interesting here. You had a former Democratic advisor sound the alarm about the party's terrible strategy to vocally oppose Elon Musk's effort to cut wasteful government spending. The morning meeting, Dan Turrentine, well, we played him before. He's on with Mark Halperin. Let's see if I can find the audio now. Argued that Democrats' backlash to slashing fraudulent federal spending means they are failing the common sense test. Terrible was his response when asked about Democrats' strategy to vocally criticize Elon Musk's efforts. He argued the party is ignoring that Musk's team is uncovering legitimate areas of wasteful spending, instead focusing on the process. The number one thing in politics is you want to respect people, listen to them, and solve their problems. We're failing the common sense test, rather than saying, hey, some of what they're finding, everybody in their right mind would say we should end it. Instead, we scream about everything. And so when we find stuff that, in our opinion, probably is worthy of discussion, the average voter says, forget it. All you do is scream no, and they're crazy. That's a quote.
Yeah.
They're crazy.
Right.
And it's true.
Well, it is, because you're not going to win that with the American people. If it's, boo, government efficiency. I mean, that's not a winning chant. What they're trying to do is, well, so many people are going to be laid off. So many people will be out of work. So many people will be, that's the route some of them are going. But as a party, if you're going to protest against trimming the fat in government, that's a loser all day. Because the overwhelming majority of people aren't going to be directly affected by those cuts. You know, one of the things we talked about is rescinding a lot of the Inflation Reduction Act. You know, that's one of the things they can do on Capitol Hill that the president can take credit for, you know, and that's not going to have the populist effect that, of course, cutting jobs, you know, eliminating positions is going to have. And I think that's one of the moves they can do, you know, very quickly, and hopefully they'll move on that.
You're listening to Red Eye Radio from the Uniden America Studios.
And he is Eric Harley, and I'm Gary McNamara. Good morning. Download our Red Eye Radio app today. You can listen when and where you choose. After our show is over. Over? We record it, and we play it back again.
We do.
On our app, and that's our podcast. Mm-hmm. So if you can't listen overnight, we've had a lot of people. This is the best thing because a lot of people, you know, work the split shift.
Yeah.
You know, where they work, you know, overnights. My buddy's father used to be a cop. They did it all the time. Mm-hmm. His entire career, third shift, second shift, first shift, whatever.
Right.
And so before, you know, we had the digital presence a long time ago. People would say, I'm working. I changed my shift. I can't listen anymore.
They'd be saying their goodbyes quite often in email.
Yeah. We don't get it anymore, do we?
No.
It's great.
No, you can listen anytime you want. Listen to the show. We are making it about you. Be careful now. It's not really about you, but we're making it about. We want you to listen, and by the way, share it. Our President's Day sale continues. If you have the app, you can tell a friend, and that friend can download the app for free. Now, that's the case every day, but that's pretty much all we're going to give you during our President's Day sale.
Well, no, we've changed it.
To Trump Day sale.
Trump Day sale.
Yeah.
Our Trump Day sale is on now.
Yeah. Mega MAGA savings, if you will. So enjoy and tell your friends about it.
We will irritate you no matter what your time zone is, no matter what your shift is. We're always here to irritate you.
That's right.
All right.
You know, a lot of people have it set up, you know, where it will download for them, like on their Apple iTunes, it will download. It'll be there, you know, that you can set that up so it'll download and it's ready. So you can, if you're traveling, you know, you can just put it on, listen. And we appreciate that. We've actually seen it in action. One young man whose dad was sitting shotgun in the car, and the young man was listening to our podcast.
Oh, yeah.
So
that was great. That
is awesome. We
really
greatly appreciate that. We do not discriminate by age. You can listen at any age. In fact, we believe you should start with infants. You know, they have these noisemakers in the room, you know, that you can put, you know, near the baby's crib, you know, just kind of a, you know, soothing noise. We think it would be enormously soothing to play Red Eye Radio to that young child.
We're not ageist.
No, we're not. Yeah. We're not.
Well, in one area.
Yeah.
At one point, being the single guy here, I was thinking about, you know, the whole cougar thing sounded pretty exciting.
Yeah.
You know, wow, a cougar, huh?
Right.
And then I realized at my age, a cougar would be 107.
Exactly. Yeah.
And so.
Yeah, not as appealing as it once was.
A little bit of the excitement went out of that thought process there.
Right.
All right, you ready?
Okay, what do you got?
All right, this is CBS's Gayle King yesterday talking to the head of Delta. Probably did not get the answer that she wanted.
Right.
because of all the panic of the airline crashes.
Okay.
All right, here we go. She's talking to the Delta CEO.
All right.
No, the Trump administration recently fired many employees of the FAA administration. Do those cuts worry you, and do you think that impacts the safety? I know you just said it's the safest way to travel, but after looking at all these mishaps, a lot of people are very nervous. Do these cuts affect you?
The cuts do not affect us, Gayle. I've been in close communication with the Secretary of Transportation. I understand that the cuts at this time are something that are raising questions, but the reality is there's over 50,000 people that work at the FAA, and the cuts, I understand, were 300 people, and they were in non-critical safety functions. The Trump administration has committed to investing deeply in terms of improving the overall technologies that are used in the air traffic control systems and modernizing the skies. They've committed to hiring additional controllers and investigators and safety investigators. So, no, I'm not concerned with that at all.
Yeah.
We haven't talked about this, but, of course, because it's starting from the left, the panic about how unsafe, airline flying is.
Right.
And Swalwell now they're looking at all the private, airplanes as that. There's a private airplane crash. That's Trump's fault, too.
Mm-hmm.
And as we know, there are many more private airplane crashes than there are commercial airliners.
Yeah.
Right. We went, Colgan Air, the one that crashed near my dad's house, back, what was it? Was it 2009 or?
I think
was
so.
that 2009? Yeah, because we went, 16 years, almost 16 years without a commercial airline accident, fatality in the United States. That's mind-boggling when you think about it. It's 150 million flights, commercial airline flights, once every 16 years. You think about it, that we all should be, if we use the same paranoia that we as a society, especially on the left, do, my gosh, nobody would be driving cars.
Right. Yeah.
I always find it amazing when people are weaving in and out of traffic, and I really believe part of it is people don't understand science. They don't understand physics. They do not until you get in an accident, they don't.
Right.
But if you understand physics and you understand inertia and mass, obviously you understand, my God, I got to be careful when I'm driving.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
But really, the panic should be for driving and walking.
Yeah.
Is it still the case? I would assume that if we hadn't had a airline crash in the United States with 16 years, that has to be probably one of the safest places to be on the planet. I know it used to be, and there's fewer accidents today. But should we up the equipment? Yeah, we should up the equipment. It should be the most modern equipment in air traffic control, and they should look at that. But as we know, it doesn't matter what the organization is in government. I guarantee there's too many employees.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, it's creating efficiencies actually makes it, I think, ultimately safer when there's a focus on safety, which, again, I'm with you on the equipment. You're going to want to improve everything you can about all of the fleets that are out there, all of the commercial fleets that are out there. There should be the best equipment. But that happens, if you think about it, that really is part of the demand. The word gets out that, okay, well, the aging fleet at so-and-so airlines, and then people get nervous, and you start seeing a change in behavior of booking flights and everything else. Well, that is something where, as a part of the demand, there is an upgrade. And the airline companies know that.
Well, when you look at a lot of these planes, you look at it was the CRJ 700. It's a pretty modern plane. You look at the equipment in there. You look at how they sell those things. It's like it's pretty modern equipment. It's really not the equipment they're talking about in airplanes, because one of the things is there has been, as we know, you look at. I remember I was always flying regional jets. There's a lot less regional jets. Most of the time I'm flying it's a 737 or I think the smallest plane. I've flown a couple of CRJ 700s, which are a fine plane, a great plane. But it's either the smallest plane I probably fly, because I fly quite frequently. It's probably the Airbus 319.
Yeah.
And the rest would be, the new 737s. All the MD-80s are gone. I fly American Airlines 99.99999% of the time. I do live in Dallas. That's what you do when you live in Dallas. And you want a direct flight to Buffalo. But the airplanes themselves, the technology, for the most part, is top of the line.
Well, a lot of that comes from, we've talked about it, the investigations through the NTSB, the findings of, okay, how to detect this, things like wind shear over the years and all these things that can be detected ahead of time that helps to prevent. It makes it safer. The NTSB is one of the organizations, in fact, the premier organization on the planet in terms of investigative agencies that has led to those types of improvements. And it's, I don't have any concerns whatsoever, but the leftist media wants you to believe, and you heard it right there in the tone of the questioning. We'll make people nervous by just continuing to talk about it and not be truthful about it, not divulge all the facts. These are supposed to be journalists. Of course, they're not. They're activists. If you were a journalist, you would state in the beginning, it's only a few hundred out of 50,000, and these few hundred are not in critical safety-related positions.
Right.
So is it unfounded that people would be nervous? That's where you would start. But they can't have that. They have to be activists and pretend like their fear is based on something real. And it's not. It isn't. And it's reprehensible because you do have a number of people out there. I'm not one, you're not one, but there are people out there that are very nervous when it comes to flying. And I feel for them because in today's world, if you want to get across the country, it's the most efficient way to do it.
Oh, maybe it's just because I love history. And when you look back at how technology has changed everything, the fact that, because everyone knows I'm really close to my family. And I remember when I made the move, when I moved from Buffalo, where I was working at the number one station there, and got hired by our great affiliate, KXL, dominates talk radio in Portland, Oregon. What a great lineup they have. The great Lars Larson. Man, we had a good time. Oh my gosh! Did I ever tell you remind me a little bit of Lars?
Do I? That's a compliment.
Just a little bit. It's just, and I think it's because I have more chemistry with you because I've worked with you for almost 20 years now.
Yeah, right.
Lars and I just, we didn't share the same show. But I remember there were times my show was like 9 to 12 and Lars would come on at 12 and I would just, all right, you cross over a little bit, stay for 10 minutes.
Yeah.
There were times I stayed on until 3 o'clock in the afternoon.
Yeah.
It was especially during the whole Clinton sex debacle.
Yeah.
I mean, it was so much, it was really so much fun. But when I moved out there, I remember saying, I'm never going to take a job unless I make enough money where I can budget, out of town, unless I make enough money where I can budget, to see my family. And the way you do that is with airplanes.
Right.
And one of the things I get from anybody who knows me, any of my, my personal friends, is, wow, you don't even think about flying anymore, do you? No. It's like just jumping in your car or an Uber. I go, yep.
Yeah. I've never had any concern whatsoever. My greatest concern about flying is the process after 9/11, but that's not a thing if you still understand, if you're going from one corner of the country to the other, still by far the most efficient way, the only way to get there efficiently.
And being loving history, used to take a year to cross the country.
Mm-hmm.
For me, especially, as my parents got older, to be able to fly in on a Friday night, stay Saturday, be back Sunday morning, direct flights, the best thing ever.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And after I flew with the Thunderbirds in an F-16 and did everything they did in the show, including taking 9 Gs, yes, I had the G suit on.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing in an airplane scares me anymore. Nothing.
Yeah.
It's a commercial airliner's like, this is wonderful.
Right.
Because you do. When you're in an F-16 and you're sitting there and you've got, the canopy comes over and you're flying, you feel like you're in the cartoons when, I don't know, was it the Roadrunner or the Coyote would be on the rocket, straddling the rocket?
Yeah.
That's what it was like.
Right.
So commercial flying's a piece of cake. 866-90-RED-EYE.
Lines open for your calls. 866-90-RED-EYE on Red Eye Radio.
It's Red Eye Radio. He is Eric Harley, and I'm Gary McNamara. Welcome and good morning. Thanks so much for being here. Coming up, what is in? Because we don't have the text yet. I mean, what's the bill that Republicans are looking at with the reconciliation bill? What actually is in it? Even though they don't have the text, what is being discussed?
Right. Right.
Because that's where the devil is in the details.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it really will be interesting to see how this goes through, what is in it to begin with, and how much support there really is for it.
This is Red Eye Radio on Westwood One. Now, it's Red Eye Radio. Gary McNamara and Eric Harley talk about everything from politics to social issues and news of the day. Whether you're up late or you're just starting your day, welcome to the show. From the Uniden America Studios, this is Red Eye Radio.
All across America and around the world, we are Red Eye Radio. He is Eric Harley, and I'm Gary McNamara. Good morning. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you.
How's everybody doing?
Cold.
Yeah, it is. I just stepped outside a couple of minutes ago. It's a tad bit chilly out here, but I really can't complain though.
No, I really don't have any complaint because I think of myself. I think of like the people that have to work outside in places that have real winters. Right now, in fact, we had one of our listeners earlier that sent us Coach Anthony sent us this new record low for Minot, 33 below. Yeah, and that happened on Tuesday, this past Tuesday, and right now in Minot, 16 below.
Nah.
Yeah, so
No.
I have been. I think it's 17 below is the coldest I've ever been. The answer is no, thank you.
I think mine was. It was somewhere between minus 17 and minus 22 degrees.
Mm-hmm.
And this goes back to the winter of 93, 94, when I was living in Rockford, Illinois, and working at our great affiliate, WROK. And I'm telling you, I had my apartment there, and I remember, I had the sliding glass doors,
Mm-hmm.
but it was frozen I mean, the wall, the inside wall,
Mm-hmm.
there was ice on the inside wall.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't have, any of the, engine heaters or
Right.
nothing like that
Right.
I could plug into.
Right.
I was getting up like every 4 hours and starting my vehicle
Yeah.
and running it around. So, in the middle of the night, I'd wake up. If I went to sleep at 10, I'd be up at 2. And before I went to sleep at 10, I'd run my car. I was afraid it was never going to start again.
Right.
And I remember driving my vehicle, at like minus 17, minus 18, minus 19, minus 20. Your shocks really don't do anything.
Everything creaks. It sounds like it's all going to shatter
Yes.
in pieces.
Yes.
And it's like, how do you even get that done? My dad has a diesel heater built into his pickup truck. So you just plug it in. He's got a little plug right there at the front door, and then run the extension cord, and you just plug it in, right? When he had been in the hospital was right before that first big cold front a while back. It was like, let's plug in the diesel, and he was in the hospital, and I was going back and forth from his house to look in on Mom and the hospital. And I plugged that in, but we weren't anywhere close to being at, 15, 16 below. It was going to get down to, I think, where they live, I think it was going to get down to 19 or 20 degrees that following night. So we just plugged it in just to be safe. I think it would have been safe, but he loved it. He said he had plugged it in. He's used it a few times, and he loved it because, you get in, you don't even have to wait. It's already warmed up. Boom, starts right up, runs great. I don't have that need for that, and would never have that desire to live in a place where I had a built-in heater on my truck.
I'd become a wimp, even yesterday.
Yeah.
I went out and got the mail, and that was about it. And it was 16, 17, 18 degrees. I've really become, in my older age, I've become a complete wimp when it comes to cold. And, my dad always asked me, well, when you retire, you're going to move back here? I don't think so. No. I'll come visit in the summertime.
Yeah,
I'll visit, but I've had enough of the cold. Not that I want to live, Phoenix or Vegas during the summer probably would get too hot for me, but Dallas, even when we occasionally we'll get 110, 112. It's a couple of weeks and that's it, during July or August. Mm-hmm. You don't get, it's not, what people don't understand, because I get it all the time. We live in Dallas, it's horrible. Not really. You take middle of September to really middle of June. Mm-hmm. It's fine.
Yeah.
The middle of June to beginning of September, you get some hot weather, but it's not bad. It really isn't. Everything's air conditioned, so I would much rather have the heat. I don't know if I could take, 3 or 4 months, though, of 113, 114, 115 degrees, even with the real dry heat.
Yeah.
It just, but I hate cold, and I dealt with it for such a long time.
Yeah, yesterday my wife's remote start wasn't working. I pull up at the house, right after the show, and I remote started her vehicle because I wanted to make sure she had gasoline, right? That I was going to go get gas. So she had a full tank. I was like, all right, great. So I shut it off and go inside. And about an hour, a little over an hour later, she was getting ready to leave for work. She was going to start a car. Remote start wouldn't work. It's like, all right. So I bundled up in my winter jacket, which I use probably one day a year, if that. I've got some great winter jackets. And, yeah, I've got
this one?
Yeah, it's there would be no need except for what we're experiencing right now to have this jacket, and you're going to be outside for, a considerable period of time possibly. I carry it with me when I'm traveling traveling in cold weather, just in case something happens and I have to walk. But I go out there and, start the car, turn the heater up, and go back inside. And that's pretty much the extent of. I dusted the snow and ice off of the shrubs, and that was pretty much it. I think of the people that, again, like Minot. They're going to it all. I had a buddy of mine, Rob, who I forget where he was living at the time. Was it Michigan or somewhere? And he talked about the same thing: the ice on the inside of your window or sliding glass door or whatever forming. And a lot of the apartments back then, they're just not, even up there, just not built for that kind of weather. But then you think of like a sliding glass door. Well, that's not built to really insulate anyway. And so the humidity from inside, along with the freezing temperature, probably sub-zero temps on the outside, creating that ice actually on the inside of that window on that sliding glass door. And he used to talk about that. He said, it was just, so cold inside that apartment. You just had space heaters everywhere. But, I cranked my heater up yesterday, put on my sweats, and I wasn't going anywhere. I had no desire to go anywhere.
Yeah, and probably not much. Well, probably today it's supposed to get up to like 30. 31, 32.
Yeah,
so.
yeah.
So I'll probably head out today. I can't be I'm from Buffalo. I can't be a complete cold wimp.
Well, by the afternoon yesterday, we got to 27, 28 degrees. That's not bad at all. So, but I wasn't awake by then. So, by the time I got home in the morning, it was like, I'm going to call it a day. I got everything out of the way in major projects until the weekend. So. And then we're going to be 72 by next Tuesday. And that's the weather I love. Yeah, I'm ready to get out nonstop and just be outside nonstop. That's what I'm ready for. The days are getting longer, and I'm all about that.
All right, I found the framework for the budget for the House.
Yeah.
I don't have the Senate. I have the House, though. Well, the Senate doesn't have the tax cut because that would be reconciliation bill number 2.
Right.
But I have it now from the Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget. And again, this is the budget. This is where they do it for 10 years, just so people know. We're not cutting. Congress is not cutting $2 trillion a year. They hope to cut $2 trillion over a 10-year period, which would be $200 billion.
Right.
Now, in order to do that, in order to get to that, because remember, it's not just what you're going to be spending, it's what they believe the tax revenue is going to be.
Yeah.
And the tax revenue they base right now, the projection from Congress is, for everything that they do, the projection right now is 1.8% growth per year for good years and bad years. In order to reach the $2 trillion in savings, they estimate growth will be 2.8%. And that's where you're going to get the conservatives say that's too optimistic. That's where they're going to look at it and say, okay, the budget's economic assumptions, according to the Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget, are overly aggressive in the ultimate direction of the economic effects, likely ambiguous. If they resulted in mostly positive economic feedback, we estimate that debt would be 123% of the GDP by 2034. Compared to 117% the projection is right now. So the estimated debt would be 123, which is more than it is right now of the budget by 2034. Or if they resulted in mostly negative feedback, they estimate the debt would be 129% of GDP.
All right.
They passing the reconciliation bill right now which isn't including the $500 billion more in savings that they plan to put into it, would have the budget 126% of gross domestic product compared to 117% under current law. That would be by the last year. Let me just get to the other parts here. Here it is. The budget resolution assumes $2.6 trillion in macroeconomic feedback, which press reports have indicated is a result of boosting the annual average growth rate to 2.8% from a projected 1.8%. If one were to assume that the House budget, $2.6 trillion of economic feedback from 2.8% average annual growth and $3.3 trillion of net deficit increases, debt would reach 105% of GDP by 2034. They said, however, as we've written before, it's very unlikely that any set of policies would be able to get this done, this magnitude of economic feedback, and certainly not through the extension of the tax cuts, which already exist and so they don't view that as creating the 2.8%. To reach 2.8% average annual growth, the combination of policies would need to increase the 2034 GDP by 10% and increase the average annual growth rate by about 55% a year. So there you go.
Yeah.
And again, we always talk about when you do a budget, we've criticized Republican and Democrat. Remember the Obama? Oh, good God. Remember when the Obama economic thing? I mean, they had growth like, what was a growth like at 3.8% or something?
Right, yeah.
It's like you're not going to get there. Can you get to 2.8%? Could you? Is it a possibility? Yeah. Average annual growth of 2.8%. That might be a problem. And so that would be the thing that conservatives would look at and say, well, you're being overly aggressive on what tax receipts are going to be. But even if at the most optimistic point, debt would still be 105%. If everything went your way and you got the 2.8% growth, you would still have debt would reach 105% of GDP. You're not getting rid of the debt. You're not paying off any of the debt, even by the most optimistic numbers, which, again, I'm not being critical of it. It's just the reality of how much debt we have and how big the federal government is and how hard it is to cut. Now, if you can actually get to that point of 2.8% growth, you're still going to have massive debt. You can't pay it off. But even at the most optimistic, you're not talking about $2 trillion in cuts per year. You're talking about, hopefully, at the maximum output of what they believe they can get in economic growth, $200 billion a year. Which you and I said, if you could get $100 to $200 billion a year, that would still be unbelievable if you could do it. And that's why you've got to be very careful with, throwing out all these figures. We're cutting $2 trillion. It's going to be great. $5,000 back for everybody. You've got to get that through Congress. And the odds of adding that on to what they already have here is going to be tough.
Yeah, right.
Looking at it realistically. So there we are. We've given you the most optimistic and the most pessimistic view of the budget as done by Republicans. As done by analyzing if economic growth is here or economic growth is there.
Right.
And if it's somewhere in between, even if you increased economic growth from the projected 1.8%, let's say you'd got 2.2%, which would be a huge increase, you're still talking about massive debt.
Right.
And then probably not $200 billion in savings per year.
Yeah.
You might only be looking at $125 billion or whatever. And so that's how massive the problem is. And so that's why it's necessary for what they're doing. This makes it even more necessary for them to get in there and get that report out to the American people about what they can actually do, to cut.
Right.
When it comes out next, they're going to continue to do it, but they keep adding it up and saying there's trillions of dollars. Well, what is it, over a year period, 10-year period, 20-year period? What are we talking about, the savings, and are they realistic? Are they actually going to happen? Because if they don't, for example, it was in what is it, the rapid response, that they believe there are tens of millions of people collecting Social Security illegally. Is that true?
Right. Is that true? Are those payments actually going out? Are we talking about accounts that are not open yet?
866-90-RED-EYE.
Get in touch with Red Eye Radio, toll free at 866-90-RED-EYE.
It's Red Eye Radio. He's Eric Harley, and I'm Gary McNamara.
Correction, going into the break. Are these accounts that haven't been closed yet, that old accounts that are still open, these old Social Security payment, accounts? All of this, by the way, should be audited every single time, every day. There should be a continuous auditing of this process. The fact that we're finding out that all of this is in place right now, all of these problems are in place right now, is the problem, in my opinion.
Catch all 5 hours of the show live every night on the Red Eye Radio app, available in the App Store. Red Eye Radio.
And he is Eric Harley, and I'm Gary McNamara. Welcome and good morning. Thank you for being here this morning, as always. One thing that the Republicans are going to have to do, Congress and the White House are going to have to communicate, because they're going to have to talk about, because what you hear every day is these are the things that we're saving you money on. We're saving so much money that the figure now of 20% of what is saved should be going back to the taxpayer, which the figure $5,000 has been brought up. All right? That's not part of the budget over the next 10 years for the Republicans.
Right.
You're going to have to, if the budget ends up being bigger, which it probably will be, but if the budget is bigger next year than it is this year, you've lost all political clout. Because of what you've been telling the American public, you're saving. Right. Whether you're saving it and whether it's inflation or just whatever it is that is driving up the budget, interest on the debt, whatever, because that's a driver of it. The Democrats will have that against you, saying they promised all these savings and they're spending more this year than they did last year.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the challenge. That's one of the challenges that they have.
Yeah, it really is the follow through, because if it's going to be, it needs to be a pattern of behavior. They're going to and it's going to have to go through, in fact, the next 4 years. It has to be especially for conservatives, to be on board. The Democratic Party is going to have you on, a number of things if you don't follow through. But conservatives are also going to hold your feet to the fire. At some point, the honeymoon period will end. It always does. Unless you can keep doing good work and improving. And Trump has a track record of being able to do that. We go back to his first term and things that he got done leading up to COVID. Well, I think he has the ability here to make improvements, especially over everything that has happened with that Joe Biden and the Democratic Party put into place. He's got the ability to really be on a roll here. But the party has to be on board, and you're right. There has to be a communication between the White House so that the entire party comes together, the White House, Capitol Hill, working together. That's the other thing that, again, you've got many in the GOP, a number in the GOP that are saying, we don't want tariffs. Well, the president's going to do tariffs. So the question is, where is that, or is there a line to which, okay, look, we're going to do these things over here, and we're willing to look the other way if you're going to move on tariffs, and we'll take the wait and see approach because that's going to be in your wheelhouse. We're not going to move on tariffs.
Again, when you look at, for example, tariffs, they know tariffs will slow down economic growth.
Right.
If right now the most optimistic viewpoint is 1.8% GDP growth over the next 10 years, and you're upping that to 2.8%.
Yeah.
Which,
yeah,
you're talking about, what, a 40% increase in GDP that you would have to average over the next 10 years. And you're saying, okay, we believe that we should have tariffs across the board on everybody. Then what's going to get you that 2.8% growth? Here's another thing when you look at it, because this is what came out yesterday. And I went, oh, boy. The whole thing of Elon Musk and the number of $5,000 going back to every taxpayer. Was that a one lump thing? Is it $5,000 over 10 years? What is it when you say $5,000 in savings? Because you're saying there's this incredible savings to the point where if you're going to give $5,000 back to every, because if you want to really make an impact of, and by the way, what would that do to inflation?
Yeah.
Because remember, you're cutting, you just don't give. Here's the point. Now you just cannot give. For example, there's 150 million taxpayers, all right? Or excuse me, there's 150 million people that file tax returns.
Right.
They're not necessarily taxpayers. Roughly 75 million are taxpayers.
Mm-hmm.
The other don't pay any in taxes. In fact, they actually, a lot of them take because they get the child tax credit.
Right.
But if you give the $5,000, you got to give it to everybody.
Yeah.
Which means even if you don't pay taxes, you're going to get it. If you give $5,000 to 150 million taxpayers, that's $750 billion you've added to 1 year.
Right.
And with that amount of money, if it was $5,000 going to people and it didn't come back as a refund, you've done way worse of increasing the money supply than even COVID, because people didn't get that amount even in COVID.
Right. Yeah.
There is no easy way to work this whole thing out. That's the problem. But if you're promising these things and they're promising the moon and you don't deliver, and if you say we've had this much in savings and then you sign a bill that increases the amount we're going to spend next year, you've lost the political edge on that topic.
Right. Yeah. Right.
So, like I said, we've always said it's easy to talk and easy to say this is the hypothetical savings, here's what we're doing here. But if the overall budget is still increasing, you've lost any political clout.
Yeah. Yeah. Look, there has to be, if you're going to bring about real change on any level, it's going to have to be consistent. It's going to have to be far beyond the honeymoon period politically. Because what you're trying to do is you're trying to prove to the people that you meant it. that you were serious about it. Well, that starts with that whole 1.8 growth versus 2.8 growth, right? It's like, all right, you're going pretty optimistic there. Are you going optimistic to give yourself the leverage on your math? Well, that's what we're used to, right? That's why cynics like us look at this and go,
because that's what we've dealt with that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And we don't want that repeated. The whole idea of this new era is that you don't behave like we've seen in the past.
That's a great point. I mean, the whole concept of DOGE is it's not going to be the status quo. We're changing the status quo.
Right. And so, it has to go beyond appeasing for the moment. It has to go beyond just handing out the gifts, on Christmas morning. It has to be demonstrated that this is a real change in behavior and that it's going to be consistent. And that it isn't just a political promise, to achieve something short term, that long term it has to be something very real, which is very hard to do.
Well, let's put it this way. It's been impossible in the past to do.
Exactly. Yep. And what have we seen from the GOP in the past? Again, it's hard to compare the GOP in the past to where the party is now under Trump.
Right.
It is a new era. I do believe that. But also your holdouts, and reality on things like the 1.8 versus the 2.8 when it comes to growth. You've got to be, because we see those things from, whether it's the CBO, which scores basically whatever, you put garbage in, you're going to get garbage out. CBO scores whatever you give them, right? Well, all right. What is the very realistic projection on those numbers? Because if you start on a false premise, everything that follows in your plan seems logical, except you have to go back and check that false premise, that those unrealistic numbers, in this case, if they are out of reach. And if that is the case, then be realistic and be honest with the American people. This is what we believe we can actually get done. This is what we believe politically we can get done. And to compare that to where we were, I mean, you think of things like the GOP moving on welfare reform. In the grand picture, on the grand scale, that was tapping the brakes. That really wasn't reversing anything. If you're going to do something meaningful and bring about a new mindset about being serious about spending, then you have to demonstrate that consistently, and you have to start with realistic numbers. Because not starting with realistic numbers is something we've done before. We've been here.
Mm-hmm. And it's what you have to communicate, especially with such optimism coming from Musk and the president about, what they're saving and what they're cutting.
Mm-hmm.
If the budget doesn't reflect that or doesn't reflect even a part of it, and if the president signs the bill, there's a political problem.
Right.
And again, we don't know because this is just a rough framework. We're just right. Looking at what the information that we have now and what the Republicans have said the scoring is on the possible budget bill.
Yeah.
And you look at it and you go, okay. Because the last thing you want to do is be so overly optimistic where the Democrats can use it against you.
Right.
Because I don't know, how do you work in the fact? Let's just use it for example. The president came out with his executive order yesterday. No federal funds to illegal immigrants at all. None.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Right.
And let's say that saves, I have no idea what the figure is, $100 billion a year. Why can't Republicans put that in the budget as part of the budget?
Right. Yeah.
Why isn't that in there? Why can't they take all the savings and have that in there as a projection? Why can't that be in there? Because people say, well, you don't know if anything else is, you don't know if you're going to have 2.8% growth either.
Right.
But if you're attempting to make the political point, whatever the savings are from DOGE, why can't that be replicated in the actual budget that the president will sign?
Well, it's a good point, because ultimately, this could be the progress report on DOGE of what you've found so far. We don't have to wait till July 4th of 2026 for the ultimate report.
You see the progress already.
You see the progress already. This is what, in just the findings so far to date, this is what we believe we can apply to the budget. And here's what it looks like. So that would be leveraged in two ways. You're giving the American people a progress report on the work by DOGE, and you're putting it to use. You're applying it, saying this is what that would mean. So I would attempt to do that. I would attempt to do that before I projected unrealistic growth. If I believed that was out of range, again, they have been blunt, honest, and very proactive. Don't lose sight of that.
866-90 Red Eye.
We'll be right back with more Red Eye Radio with Eric Harley and Gary McNamara.
It's Red Eye Radio. He's Eric Harley, and I'm Gary McNamara. Welcome and good morning. More on the president working with Congress for the tax cuts. And there's more tax cuts than even is in the framework.
Yeah.
So this thing could be different here in the next week.
Yeah.
So we'll see. We'll get to that. Plus, James Carville tells Stephen A. Smith, you don't know your posterior from a hole in the ground when it comes to politics.
Right. Yeah. Okay.
From the man who said, oh, Harris is just going to kill Trump. Remember?
Yeah. Right.
Right before the election.
Right.
Not going to be close. Not going to be close. Not
Right.
going to be close.
Yeah. And Stephen A. Smith is the one with the problem. Look, Stephen A. Smith, on a number of fronts, has been kind of saying what we think is obvious of what the Democrats are doing and why it's causing them problems. I can't measure how much he knows or doesn't know about the entire political process or strategies or anything else. Carville might know, but it doesn't matter. He's observing things and has been correct on those observations more than a few times lately. So, sorry, Carville. You're definitely getting it wrong over and over again. Sorry you're angry about it, but Stephen A. Smith has a better track record than you lately.
This is Red Eye Radio on Westwood One. Now, it's Red Eye Radio. Gary McNamara and Eric Harley talk about everything from politics to social issues and news of the day. Whether you're up late or you're just starting your day, welcome to the show. From the Uniden America Studios, this is Red Eye Radio.
All across America, we are Red Eye Radio. He is Eric Harley, and I'm Gary McNamara. Good morning.
Hello.
Thanks so much for being here. You know, as we talk about what reconciliation bill is going to pass first, the president came out yesterday and said that he is for the one bill with the Republicans. He announced plans for more of the largest tax cuts in American history. We're going to dramatically cut taxes for families and workers and for companies, including no tax on tips and hopefully no tax on Social Security. Uh-oh. Uh-oh. Uh-oh.
Hopefully.
Uh-oh.
What's this hopefully?
The only thing I want in the budget His no tax on Social Security, because it's all about me. He went from, we're going to dramatically cut taxes for families and for workers and for companies, including no tax on tips and hopefully no tax on Social Security and no tax on overtime, end of quote.
It's not going to happen.
He laid out his vision. Now, these tax cuts are not included in any of the 10-year budget that they're looking at right now. The president laid out his vision for more tax cuts. It includes being able to expense 100% of the construction of a new factory in the United States and reducing taxes for oil and gas producers. Also calls for implementing tariffs on cars, semiconductors, pharmaceuticals. We'll bring back our businesses back. If they don't make their product in America, then simply they're going to have to pay a tariff. But if they do make their product in America, then they don't have to pay any tariff, which will bring, it's all going to bring trillions of dollars into our treasury, or it's going to mean that there won't be any taxes. There you go. He said on Friday the auto tariffs could come as soon as April 2nd, the day after the review by his administration of the options. Mm-hmm. Yeah, but then the Treasury Department's supposed to have another 180 days. This is where you're all over the place.
Yeah, right.
You know, that's one of the problems. The consistency of the message there. So there you go. You know, and that's the problem that you have when it comes to the budget.
Yeah. Well, okay. I guess we'll see where it goes, where it lands.
Yep.
You know, none of it is easy. It's always going to be complicated. But I got news for you. I don't think the Social Security thing is going to happen.
What?
Sorry. I also don't think the no tax for overnight radio hosts that aren't named George Norrie bill that we proposed is going. I don't think that's going to happen either. I think we were pushing it on that one. It's probably not going to work in our interest, in our direct interest. Well, let's face it. The last time when Trump and the Republicans got together to tax, to cut taxes for everybody, they did, except us.
For us. Our taxes went up.
Make America punish Eric and Gary again. I think that's what this is all about.
Yes. And we knew it beforehand, remember?
Yeah,
we knew. We said, we're losing these. And the thing we objected to is not the fact that our taxes went up, because mine went up on the same amount of income, about $1,500. Mm-hmm. And it's based on the fact of certain business deductions that you and I can both take that actually make it so we can make more money. And it's a disincentive. It's a disincentive to not use, what used to be a tax break that you would get, because the reason the tax break existed was you could make more money and then pay more taxes. There was an incentive to make more money. We were against the Republicans doing a tax that actually hurt the incentive to make more money.
Right.
We just view that as a negative. We view that as a worse type of tax.
Right. If you're incentivized to make more money, that ultimately would bring more revenue. That's that's the entire idea, and also works for all the parties involved that are able to take advantage of those tax breaks. But apparently, they don't care about us.
Now, I don't know. He said dramatically cut taxes for families. I don't know. He wasn't specific on that. I don't know what that is, because if the tax cuts are extended, that doesn't dramatically cut taxes what people are paying today.
Yeah.
So I don't know if he's talking about the DOGE thing, but I just went to the DOGE clock, and that figure came out $5,000 per person. Well, so far DOGE on their clock has saved $55 billion. And the entire amount that it would cost to give every person who files a tax return $5,000 would be $750 billion. So let's go to David in Wilmington, North Carolina. David, you're on Red Eye Radio. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. You made a great point earlier. I think Eric did about what would $5,000 to every taxpayer due to inflation. You hit it earlier also when you exemplified the size of the debt based on the budget of a family. It was a pretty scary thing. That's what opened my eyes. And you talked about how much money a family made, how much they owed, what their credit card debt was. Remember that? Mm-hmm. That was an eye opener. I wish you would repeat that from time to time. But the reason I called is we know that DOGE is great because it basically blames Democrats, but it's not the answer. The biggest problem is blameless, which is the debt. Everybody shares a blame. And I remember Reagan saying one thing at one point. He said, I want two things, the line item veto and welfare reform. Of course, welfare reform, it took a while, and Clinton signed whatever he signed, and he gets credit for it. But this welfare line item veto is kind of equivalent to ending omnibus spending. We're all familiar with these giant bills with hundreds of line items of spending that nobody can even have time to read, let alone debate. And Johnson at one point said there would be no omnibus spending under my watch. Well, that's complicated. Of course, the first two bills are kind of like omnibus bills. But when you expose what's in these by having single-issue items, bills, that's in a way like what DOGE is doing by exposing the actual spending. And the other one, welfare reform, occasionally you'll hear politicians, very unpopular to say that entitlements is what's killing the country. And those come in so many shapes and sizes that, and it's difficult, but how to get people, we're in a new era of a need for welfare reform. And we don't have a Reagan or a Clinton, so it's going to be tough.
Not only that, but when you have a Republican Party that is now focused on, it's the Republican Party. It's that is talking about massive child tax credits, and these are tax credits that would benefit, lower incomes. When you look at, they're talking about yesterday. I mean, that was the number that was thrown out. They didn't come up with the number, but they said, let's look into it. So that becomes the number, $5,000 to every single tax filer. That's another $750, billion. The whole child tax credit, as we've said, people like Josh Hawley, he's going.
Josh Hawley, yes.
Josh Hawley promoting that. Well, that's just another form of welfare. The Republicans, and the last time it was Mike Lee and who else?
Marco Rubio.
And Marco Rubio that were promoting more of an expansion of the child tax credit.
In fact, they did. They successfully got it done. Yeah, they expanded the fully refundable child tax credit amount.
Right. So that's actually the welfare system. So Republicans, you're not going to get anywhere when Republicans who claim they wish to cut the budget and wish to cut the welfare system are creating a welfare system inside the tax system. Your chances of getting anything done are slim to nothing. And when you look at it, for example,
exactly right.
You look at last year, the budget was roughly $7 trillion. A little over $7 trillion was the budget. And remember, $1 trillion of that was basically interest on the debt. But out of the $6 trillion that are left, remember you've got $1.5 trillion for Social Security. You've got Medicare and Part D, which is another trillion. So you've got $2.5 trillion. You've got all the welfare programs.
And the Farm Bill.
Well, right, but I'm
which is basically sorry.
Right, I just
look at the magnitude of the Farm Bill. The magnitude of the Farm Bill.
Right, but before we even get to those things, talking about things that personally the entitlement programs of Social Security. And by the way, it's called an entitlement program because you put into it, therefore you're entitled to it. I'm seeing that come up again. But you look at the entitlement programs of Social Security and Medicare, that's $2.5 trillion out of $6 trillion right there. Then you add another $1.5 trillion for Medicaid and food stamps and all the welfare programs. And so you're up to 4 out of the $6 trillion is Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, food stamps. You haven't touched anything else.
That's what I refer to as a farm bill. Sorry about that.
Yeah. So if you get now, you look at it and you say, okay, if we're going to cut, the goal is to cut $2 trillion a year. Where do you cut it? Well, the federal government does nothing then except Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, and food stamps. That would be it.
That's why I said that cutting the entitlements is the tough one, but I think and maybe it's impossible, but if they actually could manage a way to balance the budget in the next 4 years, you might win the hearts and minds of the American people. But they don't understand the size of the debt, and that's what you did so well.
No, if you went to balance, if you went to balance the budget in 4 years, Republicans would not be in office for another quarter of a century.
Right, that's the problem.
They would, yeah. If you attempted to balance the budget, there would be too many people. Look, they love DOGE if they're not getting cut.
Right. Yeah. Sure.
We've been through this.
But if you do an across the board haircut, which would be required,
right?
If you're looking at balancing the budget in that short period, everybody's going to feel the pain, and that's where the backlash would come. The tide would turn fairly quickly.
86690 Red Eye.
Brought to you by Hot Shot Secret.
Hi, I'm Jen Loomis, a transport safety expert at J.J. Keller, and I'm here to share a tip on compliance, safety, accountability. Compliance, Safety, Accountability, or CSA, is the FMCSA Safety, Compliance, and Enforcement Program. Its goal is to hold motor carriers and drivers accountable for highway safety and to reduce crashes, injuries, and fatalities on our roads. CSA does this by assessing the safety performance of motor carriers and drivers based on data collected during roadside inspections, crash reports, and FMCSA investigations. Based on the data that is compiled, motor carriers are assigned a score. The carrier is then grouped with other carriers who have had a similar number of safety events. Carrier scores within the group are then ranked to determine intervention priority. Low scores are better, so carriers with the highest scores are those that are most likely to be targeted for intervention by the FMCSA. Interventions range in severity and may include warning letters, roadside, off-site, or on-site inspections, civil penalties, or operation out-of-service orders. This tip was brought to you by J.J. Keller & Associates. Visit us at jjkeller.com.
Coming up, more with Gary McNamara and Eric Harley. It's Red Eye Radio.
It's Red Eye Radio. He's Eric Harley, and I'm Gary McNamara. By the way, the last caller brought up the line item veto. That was found unconstitutional back in 1998. I think that was Clinton versus New York. You can't have the line item veto. It's a separation of powers issue. If Congress writes the bill, the only recourse the president has is to veto it.
Right.
But a line item, he can't change what Congress puts together.
Right.
So,
he can't cherry pick it for himself, basically.
Right. He can't cherry pick and say, well, I want this out, I want this out, I want this out. Now I approve of it.
Right.
So
he can say, I'm going to veto it if they don't change it, but it's up to them to go change it.
Right. But he can't do the line item veto. Now, once it's passed, if there's money that Congress just gives to any organization, the president can look and do efficiency, look at the inefficiencies, the waste, the fraud, and say, okay, this money isn't going to be spent. And if Congress does not specifically appropriate it, or if they do specifically appropriate it, but it is something that's under the commander-in-chief, like the military or whatever, he does have much more leeway when it comes to that particular spending. But that's after. But once the bill is presented to the president, that's what Congress has voted on and Congress approves. The executive branch can't change that piece of legislation.
Right.
That's where it comes from. So it's a separate. I remember, because I was a talk show host, saying, I can remember, thought you were a budget cutter and you're saying the line on the veto is unconstitutional. Well, one has nothing to do with the other.
Right.
But I used to get flack for that all the time when I was like, nah, sorry, folks. Yeah. What I like, as I used to say, in the United States of McNamara, there would be a line item veto.
Right.
But we don't live in the United States of McNamara.
Unfortunately.
Right. If I got to do it, man, I mean, then if it was United States of McNamara and I was the dictator, I could line it and veto anything.
Yeah, of course.
But unfortunately, with the separation of powers and understanding the separation of powers, but I was accused of being somebody who was a tax and spender because I said, no, the line on the veto is unconstitutional. So that's what you deal with. But
look, we can't all be dictators. There can only be one. That's the unfortunate thing about dictatorships.
No, we have co-dictators.
Well, that's actually what the Democrats are kind of getting to.
Oh.
You mean one person is in charge of the executive branch? Oh, yeah, that's what that means.
I heard, I saw it. Oh, I got to find it. Jasmine Crockett went under, well, Trump spoke. Elon has no power at all. He's worthless.
Yeah.
It's like now the opposite. He's got no power.
Right.
He's got no power. See, he's just useless. He's just a toady of the president.
Right.
A toady. I can't believe I used the word toady.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, man. So that's all over the place now. But yeah. So like I said, those are just the challenges that Republicans face, and that's what we're bringing up. And the challenges the president faces, the challenges that the Republican Congress face when it comes to, cutting spending and the things that they're telling the American public, here's what we're saving you. Well, you better be able to show that in the budget or promote that if we have these savings, this is what would happen with the budget.
Right. Yeah. It's, again, that to me is, if you go through the DOGE model, gives you something to go on in giving the American people a progress report. Here's what we have found so far, and also related to the cuttings directly. Here's what we could apply to this budget because we believe we can achieve these savings.
Catch all 5 hours of the show live every night on the Red Eye Radio app. Available in the App Store. Red Eye Radio.
And he is Eric Harley, and I'm Gary McNamara. Good morning. Thanks so much for being here. Let's head to Ron in Corpus Christi, Texas. Ron, welcome. You're on Red Eye Radio. Hi, Ron.
Hey, this is Ron.
Yeah.
I was just looking at you. Did you say 55 billion was what they found?
55 billion is what the counter is up to right now.
According to DOGE.
If you go to the DOGE website, 55 billion in savings is what they found in the first few weeks.
Yeah, just so far.
Right.
Well, it's $1.7 trillion deficit. It just seems like it'd be like 550 billion. It'd be like, we're on the road, but 55, that's just like 1/10 of a trillion. So I don't know.
In the first 3 weeks, of DOGE being in full effect, that's a fairly healthy pace. We'll see where they are in a few more weeks. So that's only today.
I'd like to see it too. Thank you.
Well,
Yeah.
but no. That's the point that and thanks so much for your call. That's the point that we made.
Yeah.
When you're talking related to the budget, if you're talking about all these, let's not get ahead of ourselves and start talking about $5,000 or 20% of the DOGE savings, because then the left figures out, as you just did there. You went, well, okay, 20% of $55 billion. I mean, what are you giving back taxpayers? They're talking about 5,000 was a number brought up. Whether Musk didn't bring it up, somebody on X did, and he goes, oh, that's a consideration. Well, then that becomes the number. And so that's what Democrats will use against you and say, well, wait a minute. You give $5,000 to every single person who files an income tax, and they'd have to do that because Republicans are the ones, even more than Democrats, that are pushing an expansion of the child tax credit. And so you look at that and you say, well, that's $750 billion. You've saved $55 billion, and you're gonna and we're gonna get not just tax refunds, but actual tax credits to people. That's a significant number of dollars out there. But no, we weren't judging DOGE by the $55 billion as the be-all, end-all. We were simply saying that's what you have in savings at the end of a month. Is it a month now? Well, they've been working for about, 3 weeks?
Yeah, it's been about 3 weeks for
working
DOGE.
for about 3 weeks. So,
yeah.
And you get $55 billion every 3 weeks. And, in 30 weeks, that ends up to being a significant a portion. But you have to be able to relate that to the budget that the Republicans are putting together, was our point. I think that DOGE, as I said yesterday, is one of the most important things ever done domestically in the United States in modern times.
Yeah.
It has to be done, and it has to be pointed out where the spending is, where it's going and how much is being wasted. If the American public doesn't care, well, then, hey, we're doomed.
Yeah.
But if they actually do care, we'll see, we'll see what happens, with all of this down the line. But again, we've just talked about you've got to market it correctly. You can't get ahead of yourself. You can't get caught being too optimistic. We're looking at this as political. There's two of them. We're looking at the reality of it, and we're looking at it as political consultants. What can come back and bite you?
Right.
Yeah. And so if you're talking about incredible job, and the budget that the Republicans put together and you signed for the next 10 years really does nothing to lower the deficit, well, then you've hurt yourself politically.
Right. Yeah.
And so you can't live in the bubble of today just going, let's go sis boom, rah, 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 VICTORY, and cheerlead, incredible. And then the reality comes with the budget that you sign. It's like, well, it's still going up.
Yeah. Or for Eagles fans, give me an E.
Give me a G.
Give me a number 7. Give me, how do you spell Eagles?
They won. They won the Super Bowl.
Won.
SUPPER.
That's right.
BOWL. Woo-hoo! Super Bowl.
Yay! Do we want to ask her to spell Philadelphia?
No, Waxahachie.
Yeah, there you go. We'll just start with Philly.
Or where I used to live down in Fort Walton Beach, Navarre, Choctawhatchee Bay.
Yeah, there you go.
No, Philadelphia might be possible.
Yeah.
Could you
give me an F?
Oh, man, if I'm a reporter. Mayor, could you spell Philadelphia for me, please?
Spell Philadelphia?
You said you're the mayor of Philadelphia. Could you spell Philadelphia?
We all know it starts with a which is an F. We all know that.
PHILLIP.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's Philip.
Go Sports. Yeah.
What's up next in sports?
I don't know.
nothing for me.
Yeah, I don't think there's anything.
All right, the Masters I saw was like 50 days away, so that's
woo-hoo. Yay. Let the countdown begin. Let the countdown to opening day in baseball begin.
Well, wait a minute. Now, the big sporting event's coming up April 12th.
Yeah, what's that?
The Independent Bob Golf Tournament.
All right. Okay.
So April 12th, and I got to start hitting golf balls. You know, I only played twice last year.
Oh.
Yeah, that's how bad my ankle's been.
Yeah.
So, it's feeling better these days.
All right. Good.
But, yeah, so to the last caller, it's going to be tough to reverse all of this. 1.9 trillion is what they expect. And here's one of the problems. 1.9 trillion is what they expect the budget deficit to be.
Mm.
Now, when you look at it, if it ends up being 1.9, it's actually improvement from, the COVID days or even pre-COVID when we were running, remember, trillion plus deficits.
Yeah.
When the interest on the debt was not nearly what it is now. I mean, the interest on the debt back then was $250 billion. Now it's going to close to 1.2 trillion. So if you look at the actual overspending, if it ends up being 1.9, which it was last year, well, then you're talking about $700 billion in debt, which is actually taking it down, from what it was a few years ago.
Yeah.
But when you've got the interest on the debt, and by the way, what I said was if you give a tax rebate to the people that actually paid in, that's one thing. If you give 75 million people though that didn't pay anything, $5,000 each, you're borrowing that money. You're not paying for that.
Right.
Because right now, DOGE can't pay for any of that.
Right.
Based on the savings they have now. And that was our point. Don't be so optimistic, so giddy where you give unrealistic expectations to the public of how this is going to really relate a year from now.
Well, because
in the real budget.
Because in effect, where you are now is, again, DOGE is, let's just say you get another 3 to 6 weeks down the road, right? So DOGE is in full effect for a couple of months. You have to be careful about what you're saying because this is no longer a campaign promise. The whole idea is to be transparent, and I think so far they have been. But you've got to be upfront and very direct and blunt about what you're finding and how much of that can actually be saved. Because it's not a campaign promise anymore. It's the work being done now. So you're on the job now. You're not on the campaign trail. That's a very different dynamic. And if you get to the end of it and it turns out, okay, we found all of these items and we believe they can be cut. And you have the political will to get it done and your party has the political will to get it done. Then that's great and wonderful, but all of that has to match up. You can't be promising the moon while you're actually on the job. You can do that on the campaign trail and get away with some of that on the campaign trail, but not while in office.
One of the lines that I did see, and again, it's just a framework, was $880 billion out of energy. Is that the Inflation Reduction Act? Is that what they're talking about in that? I
think a large chunk of that would be the Inflation Reduction.
I think that's one of the things that Republicans have to do and promote more of it. Right. The fact that anything that they did under reconciliation, including from the Inflation Reduction Act, you can get rid of it through reconciliation. All you need is 51 senators to do it.
Right.
And if you're going to cut something right now, to cut spending on all the subsidies for renewable energy, that's the way to go.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to do something that isn't going to affect people, but at the same time will encourage the private market and, to expand oil and natural gas and whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's how you do it.
Yeah.
And so that would be a good thing. But if it includes that, you see how tough it is, because still with everything in that the Republicans have talked about, if it's true and they can get maybe not 2.8% growth, but split it in half between 1.8 and 2.8, we still have a greater amount of a percentage of the GDP in debt 10 years from now than we do now.
Yeah, right.
And Democrats will use that as an attack point.
Mm-hmm.
Now, they're not going to cut, but they're going to say, you guys said you were going to cut. We hear it every day, and in the budget that the president just signed.
Well, yeah.
Where are the cuts?
Because the turn will be, listen, they're not going to get it done, and people are out of work. You fired a bunch of people. You did these things, and you're still not making any headway. Blah, 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 blah. We don't think people should go through this pain, and blah, blah. Mm-hmm. Again, they're not about to promote that they want to cut. It'll be just the opposite. We want to put people back to work and yada, 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 yada. So you got to get something meaningful done.
866-90-RED-EYE.
Lines open for your calls. 866-90-RED-EYE on Red Eye Radio.
It's Red Eye Radio. He's Eric Harley, and I'm Gary McNamara. Download our Red Eye Radio app today. Our show ends 5 a.m. Central, 6 a.m. Eastern Time. If you are unable to listen to the show overnight, you can listen right after the show is over to our podcast. Our show becomes our podcast. We record our show. It becomes our podcast. Also, if you can't listen to us on one of our great radio stations during the show, we on our app, we stream our show live all 5 hours.
And thank you for listening.
Yep. Let us go to Marty in Pennsylvania. Marty, welcome. You're on Red Eye Radio. Welcome to the show. Hi.
Hey, how are you? Good morning. Thanks for taking my call.
You're welcome.
I really love what DOGE is doing. I think from a fiscally responsible standpoint, we got to tighten our belts and get rid of all this nonsense. But I couldn't agree with you more that sending any money back to the taxpayers is such a huge mistake. Anything that they can find needs to be applied to the debt. You know, you wouldn't do it in your own house too many times. You know, you change car insurance or whatever. You think you have an extra $100, and, you know, you end up spending that so many times over and getting yourself in so much more debt. You know,
well, I want to make it clear. I'm not upset with giving people tax breaks, especially tax breaks if it increases the revenue, and so you end up getting more tax income, depending on what the tax is and where it lands on the whole, as they call it, the Laffer curve. Our point was that if you because the thing was, somebody brought it up on X, that if you save $2 trillion, we're not going to save $2 trillion a year. I don't care whether they say they have the savings; it's not going to happen. But that was based on if we save $2 trillion a year, that 20% should go to pay off the debt. 20% should be rebated. Should be given as a tax cut to people that actually pay taxes. Well, we know that the Republicans, since half of the people that file taxes don't pay taxes, and it's the Republicans that are pushing tax credits for people, which is actually cash. If you did that, that would end up being almost $800 billion. If you didn't do it, that would be $400 billion. They claim it would all come from the savings of that actual money, but I don't believe you're ever going to see $2 trillion cut per year.
This is Red Eye Radio on Westwood One.